Welcome back to Sabbath School Boot Camp. We are here with Jim Merrills again, Elder Extraordinaire from the Pawpaw Church in the state of Michigan, also known as the State of Denial. And we are on Lesson 10 of our Sabbath School Adult Bible Study Guide. We are talking about Jacob-Israel. I kid you not, that's what this lesson is called. Just Jacob-Israel, not Jacob's name change, not Jacob becomes Israel. Just Jacob-Israel. Apparently there are some budget cuts and ink is just way too expensive. We can't afford to have a complete thought or a title on our lesson this week. It's just Jacob-Israel, and read between the lines, I guess. Anyways, last week we talked on Thursday about Jacob leaving Laban, and that's where I wanted to begin, just to emphasize this, because a lot of classes, of course, don't get very far into the lesson each week, so they may have not gotten to chapter 30, where Jacob leaves Laban at all. And if that's your class, maybe you want to recap here what's happening, because it's a really important story, and it ought to be covered. So we left Jacob in chapter 30, where through some scheming, he becomes extremely rich at Laban's expense. Jacob does something with some branches that we don't fully understand, so that all of the strong animals went to Jacob and the weak ones went to Laban. All right, there's a difference, I think, between being clever and being deceptive, right? I mean, when you're taking all the best stuff for yourself and giving the worst to somebody else, you've probably crossed that line. Anyway, so then we get to chapter 31, where Jacob realizes that Laban is angry with him because of this practice. Laban may not know exactly how it's happening, but clearly he sees Jacob getting richer and richer with these strong animals and acquiring servants and other things, and Laban's not growing at the same rate. Okay, so if I gave all my money to Jim here, and I see Jim upgraded from whatever Honda Civic to a Maserati, whereas I only got, let's say, a $500 return on all the money I gave him, I'm going to start thinking, this isn't how this should work. I don't mind if Jim gets rich by investing my money, or he does well, but I should do well also. It's my money. And you got to think that maybe Laban is thinking along the same lines here. And so we have this scene in, we can just turn here in Genesis chapter 31, where we have all of these verses that you see over here are this conversation that Jacob has with Laban's daughters, with Leah and Rachel. And basically Jacob's got to make a case to his wives, to Laban's daughters, about the need to escape. I guess there might be a chance that they don't sympathize and want to stay. He's going to make this case. And so he says, look, your father's attitude towards me has changed. I've worked as hard as I can for your father, and he cheated me. And so on. And so he's like, so God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. Is that 100% true? I don't know. That's a hard one, because clearly there's a little bit of scheming going on here. Jacob it's not just that the flocks diversified, where some of them became speckled or spotted and those went to Jacob. No one knows how it happened. It must be God. Jacob is doing this. He's doing something which leads to some of the animals becoming speckled or spotted, and thus they belong to him. Then he claims that he had a dream about how to do this. Okay, that may be true. And God appears before him, and God tells him to leave. That's really interesting. Okay, so God appears to him and tells him to leave. But, if we were to go over here to Genesis chapter 32, this is when Laban, I may have went too far here. Here we go. We just scroll down here in chapter 31, and Laban catches up with Jacob and says, now you've gone off, but why did you steal my gods? Why did you leave, Jacob? What does Jacob say? Does he say, the Lord told me in a dream that I need to go? No, he says, I was afraid. I was afraid to stay, so I left. So, I know Jacob's going to turn out all right, and we're going to talk about it very shortly here, Jim. But Jacob is, that's why it's really important to read the whole story And there's a lot to sort out here. I feel like you can spend a couple days on a lesson just talking about these last two chapters, chapters 30 and 31 here. And was Jacob doing what was right? Did God really appear to him and tell him these things? Maybe he did. I don't know. But when God tells him to go in chapter 30 and in chapter 31, when he asks, why did you go? He says, because I was afraid, I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. I mean, that's not an act of faith. That's not what you would say if you truly believe God wanted you to go, which is a theme in Genesis. You just go and you trust that it's going to be taken care of, right? You don't leave because you're afraid. And anyways, it's a whole long thing. I don't want to spend all day on it. But
you know, Matthew,
uh-huh.
I'm getting the impression here that maybe you think that God should have left the name supplanter with him a little longer.
I'm just saying he's earned it thus far. He's earned it thus
Yeah,
far.
and he is good.
Yeah.
He is good at it.
He's very good at it. And so what we're seeing in this with this family tree, is Abraham lies, Isaac lies, Jacob lies like crazy. And it's not just Jacob, but Rachel does it here in chapter 31 by stealing her father's gods, the household gods, which is a whole conversation we could have in and of itself. But she lies here. Laban obviously is no innocent party in all of this. He's been accused of changing Jacob's wages 10 times, and he comes across as a kind of a paranoid, suspicious person.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think also our tribe of Levi, aren't they the ones that at the end of the week we find out they're also liars and worse?
Yep.
Levi,
Yep.
that's the priest, right?
My people. That's right. Yeah, and this is a family thing going on here. It's not just Jacob, although Jacob does seem to be the best at it in these stories. But deceit, and deception is just rampant through these stories of these, and he'll have a change of heart. We're going to get to this here shortly on Sunday. He's going to have a change of heart, it seems. But boy, before that point, oof.
Well, he seems to have learned from his father and grandfather.
He learned and excelled and excelled. He's done better. He surpassed them both. So we got to keep these things in mind, because when we talk about these patriarchs, we're used to just talking about them as great men of faith, which of course they do become great people of faith. But there's a journey to get there. And so sometimes as Christians, we can have this glossy kind of rosy tint when we read about their lives. Like, oh, sure, he lied and deceived. But you know what? He learned. It's like an Aesop fable or something. It's like, yeah, but don't gloss over how bad these guys could be at times. You wouldn't want to hang out with this Jacob. You wouldn't want to have a business relationship with him. You wouldn't have anything to do with him.
Here's kind of my summary with Jacob, and that is this young man has learned how to make his way through life.
Yeah, he's a survivor.
Okay. That's right. And he's done it on all kinds of levels, from spiritual blessings to making himself wealthy with the sheep and cattle and stuff. So he's learned this, and it's not until he comes into direct contact with God this week in this week's lesson, and suddenly he realizes he could lose his life, and there's no games that can be played now. There's no more supplanting anything. If God does not protect him, he's got a man out there who is ready to take his life, and there's nothing that's going to stop that guy.
Yep. And sometimes, we talk about the Bethel experience, which we'll return to again this week. This was a formative thing in his life, but sometimes that first encounter with God does not change you fully. And it's going to take another encounter with God here to really bring that Bethel experience home. So it's not just
the Peter principle.
Yes, the Peter principle. That's what we should call it. Sounds like a great book title to put in an airport. All right, Sunday here. This is a famous story of Jacob wrestling with the angel, and
hey, you're on Sunday.
Yeah, is that all right?
No, let me throw in something from Saturday.
Okay, throw in something from Saturday.
You just spent 10 minutes on last week. I just want to throw in
No.
two things from this week.
Okay.
No, I think our key text here, our memory text, Genesis 32:28. No longer Jacob, now Israel. Why? Because he struggled with God and he prevailed. I think that text is the umbrella that we're going to be under throughout these coming days of discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And then our Adventist friends would have found this little blurb called, or this little statement, phrase called the time of Jacob's trouble. There's a reference there to Jeremiah 31. But, I want to throw out something, and I've kind of thrown this out throughout our series here on Genesis, but that is we need to pay much closer attention to the things that we believe, the things that we don't believe, where we are similar in beliefs to our evangelical friends, but also where we are not similar. And I just bring this up because growing up as an Adventist, I think it was in my mind that as an Adventist, the time of Jacob's trouble was just that statement that we associate with the Sunday law. It's an Adventist statement. Well, pooey. The truth is, our evangelical friends, they use the same phrase, time of Jacob's trouble. They use a similar phrase that we do, the time of the shaking.
Uh-huh.
And I am concerned that maybe in the current environment of which I see mainstream Christianity and such right now, that we need to be paying closer attention, because I think it's too easy for Adventist brothers and sisters to just assume that when they hear other Christians using these kind of phrases that they mean the same thing, and
Yeah.
they do not. They do
Yeah.
not. But the
That's
lesson just dropped that right out there in like the
yeah.
second paragraph. Is like, well, okay.
Right. That's a fair point. We have an Adventist lens, and the thing about studying the Bible is we think that the Bible supports our Adventist faith, but we got to look at it. It's like, how would the original readers have read this? How would they have understood some of these things? Yes, absolutely. Good point. May I now go on to Sunday, sir?
Yeah, it looks like an exciting topic.
It is an exciting topic. And it's one where I think our imagination has supplied at least half of the details in this story. We'll slide over here to on the Bible side. I guess there we go. Because it's a really interesting, bizarre story that just comes out of nowhere. Jacob, of course, is doing every human thing. He knows Esau's coming. Jacob is finally in a position where he deceives one guy who's angry and left. Then he deceived another guy who's angry on his other side. And it's like, at some point of living that way, you got to confront somebody that you've wronged. That's the problem with living that way. You can't escape forever. You can't run forever. At some point, everybody around you hates you. And you created that, and so now he's got to start coming to terms with his past. And this is the real turning point in Jacob's life, because, like I said, you can be forgiven, you can pray all you want, but at some point you've got to come to terms with your past and at least attempt to make peace. There's no guarantee that Esau would forgive him, but you at least got. So, I mean, it's really grim. I mean, he's dividing up his family and his fortune into thirds, and sending them kind of in different ways, so that way if Esau attacks one of them, the other two will escape. I mean, can you imagine being in that situation where you split up your kids into thirds, or your wives, and and hope that at least 2/3 of them survive? That is grim. That's the best you can do. You think, well, why didn't he go somewhere else? Well, this is where he was called to return. Now, Esau has 400 armed men. That's what Jacob is told. Doesn't sound a lot in an age where we have millions in armed forces, but keep in mind, Abraham defeated 4 kings with 318 men. Esau is way, way over prepared to deal with Jacob, who has no army.
you're kind of flowing into Monday, and the two
Okay,
of them go
okay.
hand in hand.
I know.
But I think we need to bring out a few things from Sunday before we get too far down
Hey,
this
hey,
road with the
hey.
brother.
I'm in the first sentence on Sunday, buddy. It says Esau's coming with 400 men. I'm just trying to put that in context. I haven't even got past the first sentence, but you go ahead. Give us some things on Sunday that you see.
This is what they do. They throw in a line from the next day, and then
Yeah,
they drop it,
yeah,
and then you got to wait till the next day to come back to that line.
yep. But go right ahead,
Well,
though. Carry us on.
okay, so this. How does one know that he is wrestling in the dark with the God of heaven? I mean, I know we just read some of these stories like, like they're just almost commonplace.
Yeah,
But how does a person know this? Why would he even think that he's wrestling with the God of heaven? I
yeah,
mean, and what makes him think that the God of heaven has brought himself down to his level to be in a hand-to-hand battle with him?
yeah,
I mean, there's some thought that should be going into this experience.
yeah. It's true, and we see that verse 24 here. It just says, "So Jacob was left alone." And by the way, that should be a clue because God always appears to Jacob when he's alone. Jacob isn't alone a whole lot, but when he's alone, God appears. Okay, that's maybe a narrative clue that may not have been apparent to Jacob in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But it says a man, and it really does say a man. It says Ish. Ish just means man.
Mm-hmm.
It says a man
Mm-hmm.
wrestled with him till daybreak. Now that is,
Yeah.
if that's not an angel or God, I mean, that's the most insane sentence. You know what I mean? It'd be like Matthew went to Walmart and wrestled with a goat for the rest of the day. I mean, it's just like, what? You know, why does that follow? That says, when the man saw he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, right, and dislocated it, I guess we see. And okay, so one touch seems to suggest this is not an ordinary man. Why doesn't it say something else? Why doesn't it say the Lord visited Jacob and stood against him? Questions. I don't know the answer to these questions.
The best way I can understand it is that from the time of Eve, where the promise is given that she will have a seed that will be the Messiah,
Mm-hmm.
that these individuals, I mean, we're 6,000 years removed in some respects here, but these individuals perceive God as one who comes down to the earth and walks with them, back in Eden. Here, somehow he knows he's dealing with the Lord.
He's dealing with the Lord. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somehow, yeah.
Literally.
I mean, look, honestly, if somebody just touched you and dislocated a bone, that might give you a clue that this is not an ordinary situation. There must have been some other visual cues here that Jacob had that the writer of Genesis didn't write down. Sometimes these angels appear or God appears in disguise. Like Abraham just knows. Jacob just knows. There's got to be something about maybe the way that they look at you, the way that this man, that God looks at him, and you realize this is not an ordinary person. But what's interesting is they just start wrestling. There's no explanation of why. This would be a horrible movie scene, because you'd be like, you just see him waving goodbye to his family, and he turns and sees somebody standing there, and then they just start fighting. It's like, well, who is this person? Why are they fighting?
My assumption has been that he knows that Esau is out there.
Right.
And that he very well may have thought that one of Esau's men, one of his soldiers, has reached him. I mean, at this point, he's trying to defend himself from Esau and his army. So the one thought I've had is, okay, so someone has gotten in. This guy's going to take my life. But then, as you say, somehow in this struggle, he comes to understand this is not another Well,
Yeah.
it says man-ish,
Yeah.
but yet it's not another man. And once he comes to understand that, that's when he's telling them, I will not let go until you bless me, which almost makes me wonder if even there in the dark, he might have actually thought for a few moments that this was Esau who was about to take his life. And unless he returned the
Hmm.
blessing,
Yeah.
he could live. So
Yeah.
there's a lot here to think about.
There is an awful lot to think about. I like that connection of thinking maybe this is Esau, or maybe he's kind of like reading Esau onto this person. Jacob is always hungry for a blessing. I
Hey,
mean, just
keep in mind later on when he sees Esau, he will be telling him, I have seen the face of God in your face.
yes, yes, and the face of God is the theme here, right? Because this is Peniel, the face means face of God, as many of your footnotes will say, guys, in your Bibles. But yeah, Jacob's always hungry for blessings. Interesting because in 30:31, he's like, God has blessed me. He's enabled me to have all this stuff. And now he's like holding on for dear life to this guy that he meets. And it's like, I need a blessing. I need it so desperately. Obviously he steals a blessing earlier. Now he's going to get this blessing by his faith. And that's the way to get it, right? So we're seeing kind of a theme with Jacob, but this time it's in a different key. It's in a better key as we're recapitulating this.
And then on top of all that, we have God losing the
Yes.
hand-to-hand battle. In Ducan's book there, he writes, God did not prevail. This is puzzling. It
Yes.
truly is.
Yeah, but in his Bible commentary here, he has this comment. He says, God's weakness in his confrontation with humans is an expression of his grace and love and of the mystery of his incarnation to reach out to humans and to save them. In other words, like it's mind-boggling that we can beat God in a fight. That we can prevail with him and even overcome him, because he is limited by his limited is a I'm using that, let's just say in air quotes. He's limited by his love for us and his desire that we have faith, and no wonder that Jesus says, whatever you ask for in my name will be given to you. Like, when you have faith, you can move mountains. I mean, this is the thing, like God has a weak spot for people with faith. And you can, man, you can have anything he desires for you if you have faith. And you can even beat him in a little wrestling match here. It's incredible.
You have Christ who goes to the death mat for us.
Yeah.
And it seems as though Christ has a great admiration for us also going to the death mat to be overcomers.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. How can you? It's kind of like with your kids sometimes, especially when they're younger and you see them do something that, I don't know, maybe you're trying to get them the reason or something like that, think things through. And then they say, well, can I have this toy? Because A, it would do this, B, it would do this, C, it would do this for me. And you think, how do I say no to this? I see so much of myself in you, and okay, you got a soft spot. God's got a soft spot for people with faith.
Mm-hmm.
And, when we do this, like you say, it reminds us of his son. It reminds him of his son. So they wrestle. They wrestle all night long, and they're going at it. I don't know the nature of this wrestling. Wrestling sounds like a high school kind of sport where there's rules and a judge. This wrestling may have been, at least at first, Jacob may have felt that his life depended on prevailing here. That this person, like you said, was going to assassinate him. It may not be wrestling like, well, we have rules. You can grab me here, but you can't grab me here. You can't punch. You can't. I don't know. This may have been more like grappling, like they're struggling with one another, trying to prevail. At some point, it seems Jacob realizes that this person could kill him instantly and is not doing it. So this is not a mortal threat to him. And he realizes what he's got here.
Well, and as Ducan writes, that this is going to be the moment where Jacob now becomes Israel. And I found it interesting. We talk about the hip and the bone and stuff like this, but uh, it was interesting that in the companion book to the Sabbath School lesson there, Dukan had brought out that this terminology might suggest that this is the loins of Jacob that is being struck. And that what we're actually looking at here is at the point in which his loins are touched and goes through whatever this painful experience is. It's also related to the name change and now being the father of the nations. So there's a lot here to digest beyond just what we read in the lesson this week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I just brought up with regard to Saturday, the time of Jacob's trouble. It should not be missed here that Ellen White has some statements with regard to Sunday. We're quoting here now, this represents the trial through which the people of God must pass just before Christ's second coming, their final struggle. God will test their faith. Matthew, this reminds me of a question that you brought up when it came to Abraham having to sacrifice Isaac, or being called to sacrifice Isaac. And you were asking the question, how does this act prove your love? I mean, who would think of asking that? Well, here we read in these words that God will be testing their faith, that final struggle. Is that necessary?
Yeah.
You have all these Christians for ages and ages who have not gone through all these struggles. Why is that struggle imperative to that final generation living on earth?
Yeah. Right.
So lots of stuff to think about here.
Yes. It's a lot. All right, now, I feel like I got to get a little heresy out of my system. Like you always like to go to Revelation. I like to get a little heresy out of my system. I just want people to notice something here, just from this text. All right, it says Ish, man. Clearly, this is no ordinary human being, granted, just because of the power that's being displayed here. But notice this. The man will not tell Jacob his name. Instead, he changes Jacob's name, right? And Jacob says, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. Notice, Jacob thinks this is God. There's no other indication that this is God. I'm just going to say, all right. The text doesn't say this is God. The text is remarkably ambiguous about who this being is. It's Jacob who says, well, that must be God. And of course, we popularly throughout the centuries have said Jacob wrestled with God in stuff. But I'm just saying, there is that small little detail there. The man has an opportunity to identify himself and says, why do you ask my name? That's all he says. Like, why do you want to know who I am? And blesses him. So Jacob's like, well, it must be God. I mean, an angel could have done that, right? God obviously could have done this dislocating as well. So honestly, either way, it's the power of God at work here. So it really may not be a distinction that's worth spending much time on. I'm just saying. But anyways, okay. We're moving over to Monday now. We've got some tracks to make here, and we're going to move over here. Genesis 33, Esau and Jacob finally meet, and I would strongly encourage our teachers. Chapter 32 with Jacob wrestling with the angel and Jacob meeting Esau in chapter 33 are sequential stories. Often what we see with Jacob and Esau happens because it first happened with Jacob and the angel, of Jacob and God. And this is really important. So in other words, Jacob is forgiven. Dukan says that the act of changing the name indicated that God had forgiven Jacob. The forgiveness between Jacob and God had to take place before there was forgiveness between Esau and God. And I think in terms of reconciliation and the people we've hurt in life, we need to go and make ourselves right with God and then try to go make ourselves right with other people, right? But because without God's forgiveness, other people's forgiveness doesn't really matter. Now, God's forgiveness alone is not enough. Jacob doesn't just waltz up to Esau and say, well, God forgave me. It doesn't matter what you do, buddy. No, he still wants Esau's forgiveness. But it can't take place until he's got that divine forgiveness. And I think that's an important sequence here. Just because they're in two different chapters doesn't mean they're two different stories.
Couple of things that stood out for me on Monday. One is that we learn here that Esau is a ruler of Seir, the country of Edom.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, we see populations building up quickly. All right. And then, as was pointed out, this is what was previous to him as a ruler of this area were the Horites. So we're getting this picture, just like we had with. Anyways, you did not live back then.
I'm just telling you, every Sabbath school teacher who watches this is now going to not be able to say that word with a straight face in class.
Oh, man, I think my face is turning red. Okay. Anyways. Here's another thing though, and again, since I'm not really bringing up Revelation much this week, I'll throw this in. Numbers can mean something, and let's keep in mind now we've been using the number 7 frequently here in the Genesis stories. He had to work 7 years for each of his wives. He had 7 blessings from his father. He bows down 7 times to his brother. So we're definitely getting a flow of the 7s here in Genesis. Now, how about 400 men? Any significance to that? Well, 10 times 40 is 400, and both 40 and 10 are both testing numbers, big testing numbers in the scriptures. Here we have 10 times 40. This man is up against the man who wants to kill him. Yep. This is the ultimate test. And part of the reason why he struggled with the Lord that night until he knew that he was forgiven.
Yeah. I think it's great to read into that number, the intent to kill. When you raise an entire army to kill one man, it's not logical. It's very emotional. You know what I mean? I mean, if you've got the ability to, it's like if you spend your whole life savings just to spite somebody, it's not logical. It's personal, it's emotional, and that's what's Jacob is not dumb. He realizes when there's that many people coming out to attack him, they're not needed in order to kill his servants. They're not needed in order to kill his wives. They're not even needed in order to kill Jacob. It's a lot of people. And it's way overkill. Like maybe 2 guys, 5 guys, 10 guys. Okay, maybe Jacob's a runner, and you need need some people to chase after him. But 400 people? That's an army. You've raised an army to kill one person. So
hey, your T-shirt is perfect for today. We have the farmer and we have the captain. Well, those were the 2 lines that I could read, anyways.
Sorry, let me go down. Yes, there we go.
We got the farmer and the captain, and I mean, this is the guy who's been raising sheep, and now he's going up against a brother who's become a ruler and has an army with him.
Yeah, exactly. And this is not something you can scheme your way out of.
No. Those days are over.
That's right. You finally hit a dead end, buddy. You need God to get you out of this situation, because only God can work on Esau's heart. And I fully believe that if Jacob would have walked up and said, "Hey, my old buddy, you're not still mad about that, are you? Here, let me get you a bridge. There's a bridge I want to sell you." Jacob would have been dead like that. I mean, there's no way. I don't think Esau was going to have it. But
it says they kissed and wept.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stories in history where somebody kissed another guy and soon after he was dead.
I like you. Oh, yeah, no kidding. Sodom and Gomorrah come to mind with Grandpa.
That's not the path I was taking. I'm thinking more along Roman Caesars, okay?
Oh, okay. I got you. Oh.
Erase.
This lesson has taken an interesting turn here. Really, this is about what not to teach when you get to class. Anywho, I mean, the fact that they kissed and wept, kissing is obviously a very common greeting in the ancient Near East. Even today, it's not out of place to see guys holding hands even as they walk by. It's not an effeminate thing. It's not a homosexual thing. It's just the culture. And of course, that's changing as things westernize, but it's not an uncommon thing even today. But the weeping suggests that both parties, both Jacob and Esau, still felt the pain of 20 years ago. There were still some unresolved emotional issues here that neither of them have gotten over, that both of them longed for reconciliation. But of course, Jacob comes at it like, I need to survive, so I'm going to split my people up. Jacob's a survivor. And Esau comes at it like, I'm going to bring my army. They're not really sure how to approach. They don't just like send envoys to talk and say, hey, what's Esau up to these days? And how's Jacob doing? Try to get a feel for each other. They're both approaching this kind of blindly and very defensively. Jacob's defense is to split up his people. Esau's defense is to get an army. They're not going to counseling together. It would probably be an easier way of doing this. But nevertheless, the credit has to go to God here for softening both of their hearts. Now, we know that Jacob wrestled with this man. We don't know what God did in Esau's tent that night and softening him up. But clearly, externally, you see the guys with the swords. You see Esau's anger. You see his commitment to killing Jacob. But inwardly, we don't see the turmoil that must have been going on in his heart where he really deeply wants to be reconciled to his brother. It doesn't look like that if you were standing around back then. There's no indication of that whatsoever. But it was there on the inside. And I think God helped soften Esau up, saying, hey, I've changed your brother, and I've changed you a little bit. And this makes reconciliation possible, as God working on the heart. That's the miracle here. It's not Jacob prevailing in battle. It's not fire coming down from heaven. It's that quiet work on the heart that reconciles these two brothers.
And let's keep in mind, we have him wrestling with the Lord before he meets his brother. Okay. Yeah. He makes the connection there. Looking into your face, I see the face of God.
Yeah.
And you're talking about reconciliation. I just want to point out that we have a number of terms that come up in these chapters here that are related to reconciliation between us and God. So, for example, we have the word appease, this word kippur, which means to atone. That's a sanctuary term.
Yeah,
we also have the Hebrew word ratzah, which means to be pleased or accepted. And that is a word that implies divine forgiveness. It's used over in Leviticus 22. So we talk a lot about these individuals and how they set up altars here and there as they are moving about, like Bethel, which will become a place for the sanctuary. But even throughout this story, we see connections here between reconciliation with brother. Yep. We see reconciliation between us and God.
Yes, we do. The language, as you put it, is definitely there. And, it's worth noting, this battle, this confrontation was won the night before. And it was won, I don't want to say in prayer. I feel like the wrestling with God is kind of like a physical prayer. You're holding on for dear life until you receive the answer. So it was won the night before in prayer. And sometimes we got to come to that dead end in life where we don't have any options, where our natural inclinations and our natural gifts of scheming, in this case, can't get us out of this situation. And we finally have to turn completely to God and wrestle with him in prayer. That's where that expression, I'm sure, comes from. That's where the battle was won. The next day, no doubt, was not a cakewalk. It was probably very tense at times, but the battle had already been won. And God desires our reconciliation with him and our reconciliation with each other. If we've wronged people, like I said, make it right with God, between you and God, and then try to go make it right with people. You'll notice you mentioned Jacob's language here. The prophecy was that the older would serve the younger. And Jacob always acted like that. I'm going to steal this birthright. I'm going to steal everything I can, or scheme for the birthright. Steal everything. Steal the blessing. the prophecy said I'm going to be the head here. But but there's an insecurity in having to steal and cheat your way into that prophecy. I think after he wrestles with the angel, he's like, I don't need to do that anymore. I can just trust that God's going to bring whatever he has promised into being for me without me having to help him along, by hook or by crook. And so that's why Jacob can approach Esau and bow down several times and say, "My Lord." I really think he's completely sincere here, because he's like, I no longer have to be afraid of being humble towards Esau. We're not competitors anymore. I know what God has promised me, and that's enough. I don't have to go get it myself. I can afford to be humble toward him. But if you've ever met people who are very insecure about something, and they have a need to dominate, they have a need to be right, they can't just rest and be secure in who they are. They've got to constantly be acting out. They got to constantly be staking their territory. And that was Jacob up until this point. Profound transformation. I wish we could spend the whole week talking about the wrestling with the angel and then the meeting of the brothers, because as you can tell, our timer is long since gone. And we could keep going on about this, I'm sure, because it's beautiful.
So beautiful. Do you have a summary sentence for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday?
Well, I will say this about Tuesday.
Okay.
My grandmother always sang the song "Someone's in the Kitchen with Dinah." I don't know if it stems from this story or not, but this is the only other Dinah I know. And I don't want to be anywhere near this Dinah or her family. So, anyways, no, I don't have a summary sentence for the rest, but I think the Dinah thing we can deal with fairly quickly. Horrible story. Basically, somebody rapes her, a local prince rapes her, and then wants to marry her. So, there's mixed feelings about that, right? And it's a horrible thing to happen to her. The brothers are obviously upset about it. And they say, okay, sure, we'll consent to the wedding, right? If all your males get circumcised. So they all get circumcised. They're in pain for days because, and then they go through and kill all the men in the city. And they not only kill all the men in the city, but they take everything of value, animals, jewelry, whatever. And you just think to yourself, here you go. Jacob may be a changed man, but the influence of his previous life has been passed on to his children. And now they're inheriting these family traits of deception and dishonesty in order to get what they want. Now, their aim may have been noble in the sense of wanting justice for their sister, but come on, man. I mean, it's way beyond that. When you get to here to chapter 34, or actually, it's actually at the bottom. Here. Look how it ends. Jacob's like, you brought trouble on me. I just want to live at peace in the land, which is a running problem in these stories as well. I just want to live at peace in the land. And the sons reply, should he have treated our sister like a prostitute? That's how the chapter ends. Well, of course he shouldn't have treated his sister like a prostitute, but you killed them all. Not just the person who did it. You killed everybody, and then you stole all of their stuff. This is beyond simple justice. This is a huge escalation. Got a lot more blood on your hands than Shechem did in raping your sister, as horrible as that is. That's all I got to say about this story. These people are crazy.
Well, apparently Simeon and Levi are two names that are most associated with what's happened here. And, we have wondered really ever since Adam and Eve, we've wondered how God keeps the messianic line going through some of these individuals. As we often say, this line of faith, but boy, the word faith has been, I'm for a loss of words. Levi is the father of the tribe that becomes the spiritual leaders of Israel.
Yep.
So it almost seems like the prophecy of 400 years in Egypt is necessary to kind of just cleanse out some generations
Yeah.
before he leads them out of Egypt.
I tell you, these family traits need to go. And I think any parent who has ever led a life in sin before their conversion and have passed on some of that to their kids can probably understand the grief that Jacob feels right now when he realized it took me a long time to get it, but I finally got it, and now I have to watch my children behave like I used to behave. And it breaks the heart, I think, of any parent who just wants, you want to pass on the good stuff, right? And you think, man, if I would have got it sooner, would my kids have turned out better? There might be some blaming of yourself and all of this stuff that comes with this kind of stuff. So I think, man, if I was teaching this, you really can emphasize the emotional state of Jacob. He's gone through a lot the last couple chapters. And it's painful to watch. It's painful and life-threatening, as he points out. This is a horrible, scandalous thing that you guys do. We beat up on Sodom and Gomorrah an awful lot for their, wickedness, whatever it was exactly. And what is this? What is this? Is this better? Oof.
Well, and this rolls right into Wednesday. I think Wednesday is calling prevailing idolatry. I thought it's an interesting title because Jacob's name has been changed to Israel because he has prevailed, but yet you can see that the rest of the family all have their own prevailing to yet go through.
Yeah, they do. And I will say this just real, I know we're moving to Wednesday, and that's perfectly fine. I don't like this title on Tuesday of, it's not sure it's going to focus, but yeah, the violation of Dinah. It's rape. Violation is a very clean, clinical word. Call it what it is. Anyways, but yes, the family also has to go through this kind of redemption. Of course, as when we turn to Joseph at some point, we're going to realize these brothers are not the best brothers, and, to say the least. Okay, but they make their debut here with the Dinah story. And, we have these problems here. Jacob said, he says, get rid of the foreign gods you have with you and purify yourselves and change your clothes. What foreign gods do they have? Obviously, Rachel stole some from Laban. There must be others besides. We're talking about a family that even after Jacob wrestling with the angel, these are people who must have worshipped the one true God, but then also had these other gods alongside. Now, I don't know if Jacob was party to that, but certainly people in his household, and as patriarch, he's responsible for them, had these other gods as well. His wife had these foreign gods. You know what I mean? So we don't have a completely pure faith, I want to say, in the one true God yet. There's some mixing going on. There's some, just like with all of us, right? Just like with all of us, we gotta keep getting rid of our other gods.
And yet Melchizedek was a Canaanite.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I will say here, because of the Dinah story, right? God tells Jacob to leave. Jacob is always on the run. And now this time he's on the run for something he didn't actually do. But it's his family trait that's at work in his son. So, he's still on the run because of deception. And he ends up in the same place that he was when he was on the run from Esau. I guess after you spend your whole life running, at some point you're going to go down the same road again. It's inevitable. But God is here. God is now on Jacob's side, or Jacob is on God's side, I should say. They're trying to say, we got to get rid of these other gods. And what does he say in verse 3? Let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone, and not because I deserved it. But he's recognizing now, I've had God plus these other gods in my camp. Now there's only one God who's been with me, and he's devoting himself entirely to this one God because he's in trouble again. And every time he's in trouble, seems a little bit closer to God. And now it seems he's really turned a corner, and God makes a covenant with him.
There's this one line I don't think we've brought it up, but it's where after Simeon and Levi had done the lying and the killing and the plundering, and then you had Jacob who came back and says, you have troubled me among the inhabitants, I shall be destroyed. I think the natural reaction, I can't speak for you, Matthew, but I think the natural reaction for a lot of people reading that is that Jacob is thinking, oh, okay, now they're going to come back and kill me because of what my sons did. But I just have to wonder if this "I shall be destroyed" isn't a more personal thing of the turmoil, the destruction within Jacob of seeing what his prodigy is doing.
Yeah,
he knows all of his failures from birth on, and he has just finally crossed over. But now, really, there's nothing that will destroy you as a parent or a grandparent than to see, your own flesh and blood below you destroying themselves.
sure. No doubt there's some internal anguish here. I think that's absolutely true. I'd take it from another angle as well, in addition to that, and say sometimes when you get baptized is the moment when your past catches up with you and threatens you. He's made that, he's wrestled with God, he's made peace with his brother. It seems like things are about to settle down now. He's on a better track, and then just boom, he just gets sideswiped by what his kids do. And now he's on the run again. He's trying to settle down. He's trying to enjoy this life with God. And it's like he just can't seem to get away from it, right? And sometimes that happens after baptism, after we believe too. We make this commitment to God, and then suddenly everything just hits the fan, and we don't understand why. The devil doesn't want us to rest. The devil doesn't want us to settle. But God has called us to rest. He's called us to Sabbath. He's called us to claim his promises and trust that he'll bring them into fruition. But because of some of the sins we are doing, or maybe have done in the past that have caught up with us, sometimes we're always on the run. And Jacob does the right thing here in this situation. And he's like, we need to go to a place. I need to return to a place where I was close to God. And that's where we need to be. Now, of course, God called him there. It wasn't all Jacob's idea. But I'm saying, when you're on the run and you don't know where to go to that last place where you really encountered God, or one of those places where you encounter God, and try to connect with him again. Okay. I think we're at 35 minutes plus 15, 20 minutes. So we're going to finally go on to Thursday. We got about, a few minutes until we're at an hour. Now, this is the death of Rachel. A lot of these days, it seems, in our guide is about the death of Abraham, of Sarah, of Rachel. It's about the death of some of these people is just as significant as the things that they did when they're alive. Okay, so we see a few things here in the end of chapter 30. What are we in 35? So they moved on from Bethel. They reconnected with God there, made a covenant with God. Rachel has another child, and we named him Ben-Oni. That's what she named him.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jacob, like, she's dying, okay? And she says Ben-Oni, and Jacob's like, nah, Benjamin. I don't know how to structure that scene. Maybe she named the baby and then she died, and he's like, no, I want to name him something else. I hope he didn't correct her like on the spot while she was dying, giving birth. I'm not sure of the sequence here. He's like, the father has these rights to rename. Just as he had been renamed, so he renames Benjamin.
Renaming is a big deal.
Yeah. And there's a reason, right? Because Ben-Oni, as you can see here in this footnote, means son of my trouble. Which I imagine there's a lot of birthing mothers who would love to give a name like that to their kid. Just for the pain, for, all of the stuff they had to go through in carrying them. What does Benjamin mean? It means son of my right hand. In other words, like my right hand guy. So what is Jacob doing here? He's like, I don't want my son to be known as the son of my trouble and be a constant reminder of that his birth caused his mother's death. I don't want him to be saddled with that. I want to give him a new name that says that this is my right-hand son. He's special to me. And so what is Jacob doing? He's doing exactly what God had done for him, isn't he? It's a redemption for this boy, even though the boy hadn't done anything wrong. But from the boy whose name symbolized trouble and distress and death to the boy who the father was proud of. He makes this name change and changes his destiny as well, it seems.
Now, if I remember correctly, now Benjamin is the last child, isn't he not?
Yes, yes.
And if I remember correctly, his name or himself is also linked with Bethlehem. And that, of course, is where the son, who is at the right hand of the Father, is born.
Man, that's some
we got some
Ivor
messianic stuff going on here.
That's some Ivor Myers stuff you got going on there, my friend. Those kind of connections. Man alive. All right.
Like Ivor. I'll take it as a compliment.
Yeah, take it as a compliment. Anyways, this is the really interesting thing, right? Because we haven't met Joseph yet. I mean, he's been mentioned in chapter 30, right? Rachel's first son. This is the question I have. Joseph is on the scene. Was he a part of killing all those people in that town or stealing their stuff?
I just know that those two tribes there, Simeon and Levi, I know that they were most associated. Whether they were the only ones associated, I'm not sure.
Well, here's the thing about that real quick is, okay, 34. Just got to go back a chapter. Is it says that, let's see here. All right, so it says two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, took their swords and killed every man. Okay, fair enough. But then it says the sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city. So it seems like two of them killed everybody, and then it just says the sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies. Now, it is possible that the sons of Jacob also refers to Simeon and Levi, but the fact that there's a different phrase there that they came upon the dead bodies, like they found the dead bodies, suggests this isn't Simeon and Levi. These are the other brothers who happened upon seeing all these dead bodies, and they just said, well, cool, free stuff.
Are you trying to protect the image of Joseph here? Is this the point?
I'm not trying to protect him. I'm just wondering. There's no conclusive evidence that he was a part of this, but it just it just makes you wonder.
What makes you curious about Joseph as opposed to the other 9?
Well, because the other 9 are scoundrels. Joseph is kind of the golden boy, and you just wonder, was he a part of this?
Hey,
that changes you never how you view him.
You never know where those little colored threads came from to make that coat.
Well, actually, that's not really far-fetched, is it?
Oh, no. You have to remember when those brothers' families leave Egypt, they take all the goods from the Egyptians and they have all that material to make the sanctuary when they get out there to the desert.
Yeah, stolen threads, man. But we understand the Egyptians freely gave up stuff on the way out. Like, please get out of here. Those were offerings, man. The General Conference back then recorded those as offerings and tithe. All right, it's totally above board. We often don't. Anyways, I don't want to dwell on the Dinah thing, but I'm just saying when they just kill the men. There's a bunch of women and daughters and grandmothers in that city watching all their stuff get stolen. It is not they killed everyone, might as well take their stuff. I mean, there's people crying everywhere, no doubt, in that city, and angry and hurt. They cause a lot of devastation, and no wonder they had to leave. It's also not safe for all the women that were left alive. Like, what is a city full of women gonna do back then? Anyways, I don't know if Joseph was a part of it. There's no indication that he was. He was younger than the rest, and so maybe, like Benjamin in a few chapters, he kind of stays home. I don't know. It's hard to say for sure, but one wonders sometimes. One wonders. Okay. That's all I really want to say. The kids are messed up. We see that very clearly here. The kids are messed up.
So this author of ours, Dr. Dukan, he also wrote a book on Daniel. And it really struck me as I was reading through his commentary on Daniel one day, where he pointed out that any one of us can be that little horn of Daniel.
Sure.
And I thought, that's a that's a fresh thought. It's a
Yeah.
powerful thought.
Yeah.
Well, he took a similar route at the end of this chapter in his companion book to the lessons. And so, if you don't mind, I'll just read these couple little blurbs here. I actually just posted these on the Facebook Revelation site the other day. But his first comment is, somehow God will find his way through the confusion.
Mm.
And I thought that was a very interesting word that he chose to use there for all these stories, confusion. But
Mm-hmm.
notice now, this is what reminded me of his statement about us being like the little horn, or that we can be like the little horn. He goes on to say, when humans take God's place, so you see the little horn coming through there? When humans take God's place and insist on shaping, the results are problematic, even if the will of God is ultimately fulfilled. He goes on to say, we may perform God's will and be zealous for him, yet be totally disconnected from him.
Mm.
And that seems to be the case with Simeon and Levi. They were all about the law. They were all about doing the right stuff.
Yes. Yes.
But boy, give us an opportunity and we're going to play God and we're going to enact vengeance here. And then
Yes.
he finishes here with this quote, claiming God's name and his kingdom can be a veil to justifying our own lies and our crimes. And as I was reading that, I'm thinking, not only is that a powerful statement on the individual level, but even in a day in which we talk about Christian nationalism and such, it just reminds me we have a number of levels here in which we need to really be sure that
Yeah.
we are entirely on God's side and not trying to play God.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, really, really well said. And this is something we have to learn more than once, I think, in our lives. We got to constantly learn, and this is the danger, I think, as you put it, or hinting at, that the more we know about God, the greater the temptation to help God be God.
Mm.
And that's just a struggle, right? Because you think, well, I know him, I got you. Just like, if you and I hung around all the time and I kind of get to know what kind of decaf coffee you drink because, you don't drink coffee, okay, at Starbucks, your order is this. I might just say, you know what, I'm going to stop by Jim's house and bring him a Starbucks because I know what he orders, right? So I start presuming. And sometimes that's really helpful and nice that when someone does that for you. But in the case of God, sometimes that means I'm just, I'm helping God with something he doesn't need help with. Like, oh, I see that promise you gave me. Let me take care of that for you. I got it. I got it. And that's why I think sometimes believers, whether they be the ancient Jews or Christians or whatever, can sometimes be the worst people on the planet. It's because they've got, I know God. He hates these heretics. Let's just kill them for him. Save him the trouble of sending lightning or something. We got it.
God, you made the promise. We can take it from here. We'll fulfill it.
Yeah, you just told me where to go. I'll do it, right? And why wait for the final judgment? Let's kill all these men now. The Lord have mercy on us. One thing I will say in closing here is that at the end of this chapter, we see that Isaac is still alive. He gave the blessing. Usually, I think you give that blessing when you feel like your time is short. But Isaac endured these 20 plus years, and he dies at 180 years old. So, good job, buddy. He was almost old enough to be an elder in an Adventist church. And what's wonderful is that he gets to see his sons reconciled. They buried him together, and that is a beautiful ending to their story, Jacob and Esau together. I love it.
I'm just looking for the cue cards. Where are you reading this stuff from?
The prompter is in here. The teleprompter is right here in my heart. That's where all this comes from. So, anyways, Jim, thanks so much for joining me for another Sabbath School boot camp. If you're a teacher or front row type student, we do this because we want you guys to have even better classes. Sabbath School, we believe, should be a place where people grow, They grow in the knowledge of the Bible and the knowledge of God week after week after week. We just don't read questions and give pat answers. We don't want that kind of weak sauce Sabbath school. Have a good discussion. Don't be afraid to ask hard questions. Don't be afraid if nobody's answering. What do? I guess I got to keep talking. No, have a good class. Make your students have a good class. Challenge them to offer thoughtful answers and advance the discussion forward. Don't let anyone hijack your class. That's what Sabbath School Boot Camp is all about. So thanks so much for joining us. We're going to see you next week.